idea for having fire lookouts popped up simultaneously on a couple of fronts. As logging started to become a meaningful industry in the latter part of the 19th century, the private industry owners of timberland really wanted to have a better weapon against fires, which helps to be able to detect them early, so they supported building some lookouts on some high points. The U.S. Forest Service and the Oregon Department of Forestry both got going around the same period of time, and they had a lot of interest as well in getting up mountaintop lookouts so people could more quickly see and report fires. Most of the early lookouts were often just a bald rocky knob on top of a mountain or a tree that was taller than all the other trees, and that was turned into a one-man lookout station on top of a tree. Started building the little cabins on top of them really through the 1920s and 30s. And those persisted basically in their original form for whatever their life was. Sometimes they blew off the mountaintop, sometimes they got burned up in fires, but they started to go out of service in about the 1960s. Replacement of a much better road network into the woods, enabling people to get to the high points in vehicles just on an as-needed basis. Lookouts, they need a lot of care. They're in a very intense environment, being up on the mountaintops, heroic winds, heavy snows, driving rainstorms, just about everything. And so the maintenance on them was relatively high, and their period of usability every year would be dictated by the weather. Sometimes you couldn't even get to the lookouts until the snow had receded to a point where you could walk over it or take a snowcat in or something. And then as time went by and aerial reconnaissance became more commonly used after, say, a thunderstorm, then those started to really quickly supplant the need for a lot of fully staffed lookout towers. The primary job of the lookout is to spot every smoke within their visible area. Usually it's your really good range is 10 to 15 miles, sometimes as much as 20 miles, depending on the topography. And the lookout really needs to ingrain the name of every mountaintop, every drainage, every physical feature of note that's on the landscape in the visible area. So when you do see a smoke, you have a pretty good idea about where it is before you even sit down to look at your firefinder. Your firefinder is a round device on which a map of your viewing area is laid, and you have like a gun sight to look through that'll help you determine absolutely where that smoke is and provide an azimuth, which is a direction that the lookout can then report by radio, or in the older days, a dedicated network of telephones, exactly where that smoke is. Now you use a standard legal description to tell the person on the other end of the radio where it is, a township, range, section, quarter section, down to an eighth of a section if you can. And then give a description of what the smoke is doing. Is it white? Is it black? It gives people in the dispatch office an idea of how aggressively the fire is burning, whether it looks like, if you can see flames, well, then it's pretty aggressively burning. So you give as much information as you can based on what you see back to the dispatch office. lot of the people who I knew who made the best lookouts had either done a long time of working with the U.S. Forest Service or the Oregon Department of Forestry, or even were in a family that worked in the woods. Somebody who had grown up having a good working knowledge of the physical features in the land around where the lookout is. And so they can pretty much hit the ground running to be able to identify where a smoke is taking place. So it takes the guesswork out of the firefighters being able to locate the fire in a hurry. They're also pretty tolerant of some of the discomforts you run into on a lookout tower. Could be just loneliness. It's not a really great job for a person with a high degree of social need. You're on your own out there. You may be on your lookout tower for at least a week solid, but during a long-term fire bust, you could be up there for weeks. And so you got to plan ahead, pack enough food. The Forest Service or whoever is going to provide you with a lot of propane, water, your fundamentals of being able to survive up there. But it still boils down to the character of the person up there and a certain amount of dedication to really paying attention to the landscape at all times. You know, a lot of them I've known, they get in the habit of either reading a book or working on a jigsaw puzzle. Just every 10, 15 minutes or so, they stand up, stretch, look all around the horizon, see if anything new is going on. And there are also people who either come equipped with the ability to tell the difference between a plume of smoke and a cloud of dust, or a what they call water dogs, just water vapor after a storm that hangs in valleys. They're also the people who are more inclined to come back year after year after year and do it, because they establish a relationship not only with the dispatch office but with the individual fire crews out there. There wasn't a large network of radio repeaters, I'd say, prior to even 1970. So there's a lot of years in there where firefighters relied on the lookouts to be able to relay messages back and forth, whether they needed more help, if they had someone injured and need to get medical service headed their way. Just a lookout became, in many ways, kind of like an old-fashioned telephone operator. They would receive a message, they would write it down, because their daily log included everything, and then they called whoever that they were supposed to call to transfer the message to, and that's how that got done. I would hope so. You know, I think it's important to have a willing and able human presence up on the mountaintop in areas that are particularly fire prone. Sure, we have really good technology now with the cameras that have replaced a lot of the traditional lookouts, although they're often using the same mountaintops. And aircraft, really that's got a lot of sweeping use these days. Boy, it's just hard to really tear away from the essential parts of having a person up there who you can reach by a radio if you're down in a hole where you can't reach anybody else, and just to have somebody else really looking out and seeing, most likely, something that no one else sees. I never did it myself. I kept a lot of the lookouts in places that I worked supplied with water, propane, a few groceries, a couple magazines, and a bundle of newspapers. You know, just stuff to get them through, whether they'd be a few days or a few weeks. Mostly it was up when I was working in Prospect on what is now called the High Cascades district, and I went to Halls Point quite a bit, Hirschberger, Stella when it was still up. And, the viewing area is different in each one. So that was always something I looked forward to, see generally the same district, but just from a different vantage point. And getting the lookout's perspective on the country as to what he or she may have experienced as being more troublesome areas than not. And also pointing out, for example, from Hirschberger and Halls Point, about this time of year you would get kind of strong late afternoon winds coming down the North Fork of the Rogue River, and it would reliably kick up dusts of pumice dust right around where the Rogue River and Foster Creek join. And a new lookout would call those in as smokes every time, sometimes several times a day. So, it was something to see and imprint in case I ever had to go help them out. But it was useful, always helpful, always enjoyable. Generally, I would schedule going up to a lookout generously. So I would plan on spending a fair amount of time up there, because you're dealing with a person who probably hasn't had much company, and they want to talk. They like to have just another human there. Perhaps they've taken a shower just for your showing up that day, and it wasn't uncommon to have them have a batch of cookies ready, and really being inviting to wait around and have lunch, enjoy the view, and just keep them company for a while. It's very, very much appreciated. That's pretty common among every lookout I've ever met. They enjoy having people stop by and appreciate what it is that they do, and appreciate the scenery that the lookout gets to enjoy every day. So yeah, they like to share their experiences and enjoy somebody coming by to share it with them.